Whenever I come across two words repeated in Scripture, my eyes and my ears perk up. When those two words are connected to the second most mentioned city in the Bible, my mind and my spirit join in. When I have the opportunity to actually visit the place mentioned, my 2 feet start moving. And when it all comes together, it feels like something special is in the works. Such is the case with the site of the ancient ruins of Babylon in biblical Iraq. I have to start out by saying it was really hard to contain my excitement when I was on my way down to the entrance of the Babylon site and I saw this sign. Part of the reason is that I had done some research on what is called the Ishtar Gate that was supposedly recreated by Saddam Hussein and placed as the main entrance of his rebuilt Babylon. Did you know that Saddam saw himself as the recreated Nebuchadnezzar? If not, you might want to watch Saddam Hussein versus the Babylon Prophecies, now playing inside the Academy Premium Content Library at bfainternational.com. When I landed in Baghdad, one of the first places I visited was the Iraq Museum, which happens to have a model of sorts of the famous Ishtar Gate at one of its entrances. Unfortunately, that section of the museum was closed for construction, so I was only able to catch a glimpse as we drove by it. I was, however, able to find a way into the museum.
Well, one of the things I love to do is to take people into a museum. And I found just the one.
The museum's collections are considered to be among the most important in the world, spanning over 5,000 years from all over biblical Iraq. However, they prohibited me from bringing my trusty video camera past the front door, so I'll share some important pictures I snapped as we progress in this episode. I do, however, need to show you a really good video that sets the stage for the significance of the archaeological digs that took place in ancient Babylon, especially as it pertains to the fallen Ishtar Gate that has been rebuilt, but that is not presently in biblical Iraq.
James Zemon was an industrialist and patron of the arts and sciences who owned the world's largest cotton plant. In 1897, he agreed to finance a research trip to Mesopotamia. Robert Koldewey was named leader of the expedition. His mandate was to bring back spectacular archaeological finds for Berlin's museums.
He did that in a most sensational manner. He brought new life to the legendary city of Babylon and spent the next 18 years there before British troops drove him from the dig. In the First World War, he was forced to leave behind many of his finds. Koldewey had an assistant with him on his first excavation, of whom he wrote,
"I have an innocent boy with me who can't even tell the difference between a wolf's den and a mortis, but he paints and draws charmingly."
Little did Koldewey know that the young whippersnapper would leave a mark on the Near East Museum matched by none other. His name was Walter André. André proved to be a brilliant student. After just a few months, he had reconstructed the famed Babylonian lions, unknown before then, out of small bits of brick. The young greenhorn was to become a master archaeologist. Koldewey sent him to Ashur, where André excavated the city, the ancient capital of Assyria.
Finally, in 1928, Walter André himself became the director of the Near East Department. Shortly before that, the authorities in Iraq released Koldewey's finds. After 10 years of uncertainty, 400 crates of broken bits arrived in Berlin. It was like an enormous jigsaw puzzle, and it had to be solved quickly because the new museum building was almost finished. The first problem was that during the years in the ground, harmful salts had seeped into the glazed pieces of clay. Once they were excavated and exposed to the humidity of the air, they began to deteriorate at once. The restoration crews rinsed them over and over again in demineralized water. They used hundreds of tubs, André even had part of the colonnade next to the National Gallery walled off to make room for them.
Then the real work began. The team faced 100,000 fragments of stone, no single piece bigger than a human fist. It wasn't even clear which bits belonged to which bricks or tiles. The restorers first sorted them by colour on long tables. Then, in just 2 years of seemingly unending, painstaking work, they pieced together 42 figures of bulls, dragons, and lions. In order to make sure the surfaces between the reliefs were true to the original, the researchers also had to rediscover ancient glazing techniques. The Babylonians glazed 20,000 bricks by coating and firing them with a mixture of melted sand and ash, mixed with water and coloured with cobalt and copper oxide. But the technique had long since been forgotten. A tile maker in Brandenburg finally succeeded in perfectly glazing tiles according to the old model.
Among other difficulties, the brilliant visionary Walter André had to fight the Prussian bureaucrats with their lack of imagination.
Hat auch selbst berichtet, dass das Ishtar-Tor nun aufbauen zu können.
He reported that when it came to reconstructing the Ishtar Gate, people said, well, all the animals look alike. We can just do one of each kind and that'll be enough. So he managed to persuade the scenic painters from the State Opera to paint a huge backdrop with animals and had it put in the spot where the gate was to go, and all the decision-makers were invited to come and look. Once they'd seen it, they were convinced and agreed that the whole gate, including all the similar animals, had to be reconstructed.
Auch mit den vielen gleichartigen Tieren rekonstruiert und aufgebaut würde.
When the Pergamon Museum opened, the visitors were astounded by a sight that hadn't been seen even in Mesopotamia in thousands of years: the walls of Babylon.
I desperately tried to get to the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, Germany to show you the gate up close and personal. But it is closed for, you guessed it, construction. Oh, and it won't be open until 2037. Does it seem peculiar to anyone else that the Germans have one of the most significant finds in Babylon sitting in a closed museum in Berlin? Oh well, I did find a clip from someone who did exactly what I wanted to do by bringing in the trusty video camera so you could take a peek at the colored brick panels with fierce lions that line the way to the stunning blue Ishtar Gate that is inside the closed Pergamon Museum. Now you'll understand why it was a bit disappointing to arrive at the gate Saddam built that felt like the entrance to Disneyland rather than ancient Babylon. The good news is that once I got past the disappointment about the design flaws, I started walking through the gate, and on the other side, it felt like I had entered a legitimate time machine. I want to take you to the location of where the original gate stood before it crumbled and its connection to the Bible. Along the way, there is the Street of Procession. It is a sobering stroll to take in light of the thought that this was the place people celebrated parades and prisoners processed when entering Babylon. As I walked, I started thinking of the exiles who Nebuchadnezzar deported from Jerusalem. The first group he brought included Daniel, you know, Daniel in the lion's den, and his buddies Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who survived the fiery furnace in Babylon. Jeremiah states twice, in Jeremiah 25, 1 through 11, and 29, 1 through 10, that Judah would be exiled from Jerusalem for 70 years, and Daniel lived those years under 4 kings of Babylon. The first one he served was King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 2, verse 49. And Daniel made request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the administration of the province of Babylon while Daniel was at the king's gate. The Ishtar Gate was the most adorned and important gate in Babylon, with its blue glazed baked bricks, and more than likely was the gate that Daniel sat with the king during significant processions. There's a pretty cool scene in the movie Alexander the Great that I saw that depicts his arrival in Babylon, leading his military on a procession through the stunning blue Ishtar Gate. The way they created the spectacular parade through the gate may not be far from what it really looked like back then. I'm not sure that Alexander looked like Colin Farrell, though. There is an actual ancient inscription that was discovered on the Ishtar Gate from Nebuchadnezzar himself that is inside the closed Pergamon Museum that partly says these words. Therefore, I pulled down these gates and laid their foundations at the water table with asphalt and bricks and had them made of bricks with blue stone on which wonderful bulls and dragons were depicted. I covered their roofs by laying majestic cedars lengthwise over them. I hung doors of cedar adorned with bronze at all the gate openings. I placed wild bulls and ferocious dragons in the gateways and thus adorned them with luxurious splendor so that people might gaze on them in wonder. While inside the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, I found 2 of the original colored brick panels that were on the processional way to the Ishtar Gate. The bull represents the storm god Hadad, and the dragon that is a mutt-like mixture of several animals is called a Mushkushu and represents the chief god of the Babylonians named Marduk. I also found one of the lion panels which lined the processional walls, and it really is a fierce-looking image. It was amazing to look down at the base of where the gate once stood and to see the earlier walls that the Ishtar Gate was built upon. Looking at the walls brought to my mind the words of the prophet Jeremiah. In Jeremiah 51:58, it says this, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the broad walls of Babylon shall be utterly broken, and her high gates shall be burned with fire." So for those who are wondering if the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah were accurate about Babylon's fallen future, I think it is pretty clear they hit the proverbial nail on the head. Did you watch the Plus episode titled Saddam Hussein versus the Babylon Prophecies? If not, it is well worth your time. Seriously. There's much more to unpack in Babylon that will more than likely keep us here for at least another episode or maybe 2. I do think we need to go a little further back in history to understand how the British were able to do the magic trick of melding 3 distinct regions of people who were dwelling in Mesopotamia into a brand new country named Iraq, which is an Arabic word for deeply rooted, well-watered, or fertile. I guess it is time to open Pandora's box on the British, which is going to need to be within the Iraq Unpacked Plus Sensitive Events series. I'm titling the next Plus episode, The British Hillbillies. I simply cannot explain the reason for the title without that darn sensitive events alarm going off. So for those who are ready, willing, and able to meet me inside the Academy Premium Content Library at bfainternational.com, we will keep unpacking Iraq. By the way, I absolutely love coming up with these titles. Oh, and the next public Biblical Iraq Unpacked episode is titled Bricks That Boast, and it is available everywhere right now.